we're going to have today, we're going to learn about a critically important service for the thousands of people here in the Twin Cities. Metro Mobility, and I took this from the website, is a shared ride public transportation service for certified riders who are unable to use regular fixed route buses due to disability or health conditions. And I thought it was interesting too, trips are provided for any purpose. So that'll be fascinating too. Anyway, our presenter is my good friend now, Dave Russell. And he's been working with Metro for nearly 14 years and with people with disabilities and other work efforts for 25 years. So everybody at home and my small group here who will be growing, let's give Dave a hand. Welcome. Dave, it's all yours.
All right, so as Bryce said, we'll segue kind of into that. What we are is usually how I start off. Oh, and I'm Dave Russell, by the way. I'm from Metro Mobility. So what is it? So what Metro Mobility is more specifically, we are federally mandated regular public transportation service. So what that means is any municipality that has regular route city buses, the 17, the 4, the 32, things like that, are required to have a service very similar or exactly like us. It's called Paratransit service. It's meant to be an accessible form of public transportation and accommodation to people who require that level of service for public transportation. Therefore, what we do, we have to match and mirror the same level or type of service you would get if you were on the regular city bus. So the hours of availability, how long you're on the bus, the cost of things like that, all have to be similar to what you would experience on a regular city bus. One of the differences though with us though is that we are door-through-door service. So any trip that is scheduled, the drivers are required to escort all passengers to and from the vehicle. It's part of that accommodation, making sure that regardless of an individual's level of functioning or disability, they would be able to use our service. But just like the city bus too, we are a shared ride. So even though we provide door-to-door service like a cab or Lyft or Uber, we're still a city bus. And there's other passengers, other stops, other places picked up and dropped off. And I'll go into that a little more later with the scheduling, why that's important as well. So who can ride? The basic eligibility requirements are to have a disability that prevents you from being able to use the regular city bus. It's not an outright absolute inability. There's other types of categories of eligibility we'll go into later as well. But that's, with that, what that means is whether the bus service is lacking or not available, or you don't have access to because of the location of residence, that is not what determines who is eligible. So it has to be related to a disability. So there's 3 categories of eligibility. The first one is a person is physically unable to get to and from the regular fixed route bus. So this is more of a physical thing. It can be cognitive as well. So somebody with a wheelchair, there's not a curb cut, they can't access that bus stop. Somebody has a walker or cane and their bus stop is not on concrete, it's on the grass boulevard where they can't ambulate or walk across it. Maybe a cognitive thing, they don't know how to get to the bus stop. And same thing as get from it too as well. So not being able to get to or from a bus is one of the categories of eligibility. They are unable to navigate regular fixed route bus once they're on board. So this is more like the cognitive thing. They get lost, they're disorientated, they're unsure of which place to get on or which place to get off. Maybe a visual impairment, they can't see where they're at. They have no idea where in their trip they are at and things like that. The last one is a little less frequent of an issue because of how the regular city buses are. And this is they're unable to board or exit the bus. And this is like if somebody has a wheelchair, buses in the past used to have steps. And then they add ramps to them. Now all of our buses in the Metro, they have low floor kneeling. So they pull up and they bring to the level of the curb. And if you can't span that gap, there's a little ramp that slides out and you can move on to that. So not too.
Big buses have that, or
big buses. Big buses, yep. So those are regular city buses. So that third category, we rarely see anybody being approved for that one. But those are the 3 categories of eligibility. So when people are seeking the service or applying and they're like, is this for me? Will I be approved? This is the only three things we look at. There's nothing else that goes into our determination who can and who cannot ride. And then what needs to be is this, again, technical thing, the current functional limitation needs to be enough to create an unreasonable barrier to accessing public transportation. So this is kind of expanding on that. You can't take the city bus. So it's not that you have to be completely unable to use a city bus because of your disability. You just need to be exercising unreasonable effort. And what that means is, again, a clearer definition is some of the wheelchair. If there's not a curb cut at their bus stop, there's a snowbank, but there's a curb cut on the other end of the street and they have to go around the block and wheel their chair 4 blocks, yes, they can get there, so yes, they can take the bus, but that doesn't mean they're not eligible. That's an unreasonable effort. Another example is cognitive things. Somebody with a cognitive delay, learning disability, maybe had a head injury or stroke and they don't process things as quickly. And if you show them 100 times, they might be able to use the bus, but that's an unreasonable effort. And so, and this is what's nice about this, a lot of times people get hung up on that, well, my son uses the bus or my husband uses the bus, things like that, but how much effort was put into them using that bus? So just because somebody uses the city bus does not mean they are able to use Metro Mobility. Or on the other hand, if they get Metro Mobility, they can no longer use the city bus. This is not the impact. And so we have a lot of people who deny themselves even pursuing eligibility out of concern or misconception of who can ride, who is eligible, who isn't, things like that. So, and as far as a thing, it's not just a physical mobility thing. That's why I'd use some examples of like the vision loss, the cognitive thing. So you just don't have to have a cane or a walker or wheelchair. It's not just for those people, that population. It can also be for a cognitive thing, which I had touched on earlier. It's able to process, remember which bus is mine, where do we get off the bus stop, how do I get to and from the bus stop. Mental health, we see a lot of people with mental health issues and diagnoses. Mental health can be severe enough where it can impact your ability to be able to use a regular city bus. And then, of course, behavioral. And by behavior, it's not bad behavior, bad choices. It's that behavior that would inhibit somebody from being able to get a bus. So like OCD things, things like that that are compulsive things that would prevent somebody from being able to function, with at least eligibility as well. We get a lot of information and requests for the service for why people want to ride, and a lot of those times this is why I'm applying, doesn't relate to eligibility. And the reason I bring this up is when people are filling out the form and applying for it, kind of keep this in mind, because when we're processing it, if we can't determine someone's eligible, then it goes into another step, another process, which I'll get into later here. But here's what we see a lot of times, age. Age is not a disability. So if somebody says, my father, my grandmother, my husband is 78 years old, that in itself doesn't matter. But we look at that. Well, what's going on with age? As we know, as we all age, things start to happen. Arthritis gets worse. There may be some, frequent pneumonia, things like that. So when we see somebody who's older on the application, we look at what's going on because of the age. But the age in itself doesn't have any direct relevance. Safety, we see a lot of this. It's not safe for my daughter. It's not safe for my mom. It's not safe for my neighbor. The way the service is provided, yes, it is inherently much safer than any other public transportation. But again, that's not why we exist. That's not what it's for. But again, we look at why they're not safe. Well, they have the functional capacity of a 5-year-old. Well, that's why they're not eligible, because a 5-year-old cannot figure out how to navigate the fixed route system. Well, typical 5-year-old maybe. The other thing, vulnerability, that kind of ties into with the safety thing. We're worried about them being exploited or approached or things like that at the bus stop or on the bus. Again, that in itself isn't, but what about the vulnerability is what we look at. So we dig down deeper into these things. Here's another thing too, and this goes back into the unreasonable effort. If it even it's harder for a person to use the city bus because of their disability, that does not make them eligible. So if it's like with the wheelchair, if it's harder to go a block down the street, that doesn't make them eligible. If it takes them 3 or 4 times to learn the bus and it's hard for them to figure out, that doesn't make them eligible. So my job, and Sarah, the other person, the other evaluator, is to determine, is it harder, or is it an unreasonable effort? And this is where the gray area stuff comes in. Lack of or inconvenient fixed route service, again, this has nothing to do with eligibility. You could live above the Arctic Circle and you would still be approved or not approved only based on your disability and the functional limitations caused by it. We see a lot of this just because of the nature of the greater metropolitan area. There is dwindling or not existing bus service. And so we get a lot of people saying there's no bus in my neighborhood. Well, I understand that, but we still go there. What are your health conditions? What are your diagnoses? What are some of the limitations caused by them? That's what we look at. Inability to operate or lack of access to a motor vehicle. Again, we are an accommodation directly to the regular city bus and nothing else. And this kind of gets great for people. I've never taken the bus. I don't plan on taking the bus. Why would I take the bus? There's no bus. When you're applying for the service, the application asks quite a few questions. And what I always tell people is think of something of similar complexity or difficulty in that situation that you would encounter, and how do you function in that situation, regardless if it's directly related to taking a city bus or not. We also get a lot of questions, am I gonna lose my driver's license? No. If the DMV finds out that you have been approved for Metro Mobility, you go down the same process you would as if you were applying for a disability parking placard. Here's my diagnosis. Yes, I can operate a vehicle. It's a form that your medical or healthcare provider fills out. But we don't report directly to DMV. We don't provide that information. We don't share that information. Any information we get is used purely for us and kept purely within the Metro Mobility system. Or if you drive a vehicle, again, people are like, well, I still have my driver's license. I don't qualify for it. I don't need it. Again, it doesn't matter. Park your car and use it much rarer. You know, use less gas, use less maintenance, things like that. But with that too, then we look at if they do lose their license. Again, why'd you lose your license? The fact you lost your license doesn't matter. Why? I now have advanced macular degeneration. I have frequent seizures, and the state of Minnesota doesn't allow me to operate my vehicle. So again, we don't look at the thing itself. We look at why are these things an issue for you. Poor judgment and behavior again. Somebody they talk to people all the time. The term is elopement, where a person will leave a location without permission, without notifying individuals. Again, that's poor behavior. That doesn't mean that you can't have the ability to use a city bus. It just means you make bad decisions. But again, we look at why they're making the bad decisions. Person has a head injury. They no longer have that level of executive functioning to self-regulate and be able to attend to the tasks that we require them to successfully perform a trip on a regular city bus. Prior certification, everybody has to apply, and everybody must reapply every 4 years. The reason for that is eligibility is based on current functional limitations. So we need to know what your disability is, what your level of functioning is here and now. And so because you're approved 4 years ago doesn't mean you automatically get it again, even with permanent or progressive disabilities. The reason for that is, yes, we can make the distinction between what's a permanent and temporary, but everybody is treated the same. It's public transportation. Public transportation is a civil right, so nobody gets preferential treatment, special treatment, better treatment. Everybody gets approached the same way. Simply having a disability. And I'll go into what a disability is here in a little bit, but a lot of times people just put their disability but don't give us any information on what those limitations are. And so we need to know what the limitations of the disability are. So if you fill out the form and just say, I have diabetes or I have arthritis, that's not enough. We need more information.
Do you want questions just at the end?
Oh, yeah, that's it. Go ahead, absolutely. Pop in your head. Yeah, and I can repeat the questions too. If,
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
We want
okay.
mine, but, for the other people, out there.
okay. Yep, so we have a question.
So
Yeah, I probably should have waited till the end.
No, this is fine. This is actually kind of funny because usually when I do these presentations, I get about 2 slides in and all the questions start popping up. I never finish my slideshow. So
I
this is
forget
great.
sometimes if I wait, I forget the question. So what about like if you have a hip replacement or, surgery, which we're seniors, so
Yep.
these things happen. Does that make you eligible for that amount of time
Quite
until
possibly.
you
Yeah,
heal?
yep. And we'll go over that as well. So
Okay, you're gonna go with that, okay.
I will, but I'll answer it now since it was asked. So we have 4 types of eligibility categories: conditional, full, permanent, or temporary. So the conditional are those individuals who fall under that unreasonable effort. So they may be able to take the city bus, but there's certain conditions in which they can't. So therefore, they are conditionally eligible under those conditions that exist occasionally within a regular city route bus trip. Fully eligible is individuals who just cannot take the bus. They are outright absolutely unable to. The permanent is for individuals who are advanced aged. And so we look at, because once you hit to a certain age, the individual, their health condition will not change within the next 4 years. And the way the service is provided, the regular city bus is provided, will not change in the next 4 years where they would be eligible as well. So that's permanent. And the one that addresses you is temporary. So we do temporary, and those are those absolute finite recovery periods. Hip replacement, 6 to 9 months. Ankle fracture, 3 to 5 months, things like that. And you would just be eligible for that time frame. So we do that. And it's, and we look at it though, like say somebody does have hip fracture, and they say, I need 6 months till my hip recovers, but the application indicates frequent history of falls, and they were born in 1939. We've critically looked at the thing and we realized, well, this may be a here and now situation, but big picture is they're not going to be up walking again in 6 months when their hip recovered. They got other health conditions. And so when we do that way they don't have to reapply after, say their hip heals and they don't have metro mobility for 2 months, they fall again. They're not going to have to reapply again because we looked at the whole picture. And so, but yeah, we do the temporary for those things. So, yep. So what's the process? How to apply? So there is an application process. The first one is a certification questionnaire. And I do have a couple of these here. These are online. You can call the customer service center. They can mail them to you. You can download them. You can print them. You can email them. You can fax them, all that stuff. So the certification questionnaire, what it is, this is again, that part, like what can you do? These are all things you would encounter if you were to take a city bus. Can you get to and from the bus stop? Can you wait for the bus? Can you read the bus sign? So this is like, what can you do? This is this is a non-medical part of the form. This is just more of you as an individual, how you function, how you operate. I would say whoever fills this out, I recommend that they know the individual the most and they can fill it out the best. Not every one of these questions relate to you, your disability, health condition. That's fine if it doesn't, move on to the next question. I always say there's no such thing as too much information. So fill out as much as you can, be as detailed as you can, be as informative as you can. We can't ask for more documentation than our application, but if you want to submit other stuff, we will gladly accept it, read it, process it, apply it towards that whole, view the individual as a whole, how we get them approved. And then get that filled out. Make sure it's signed by the guardian. If there's a guardianship, make sure it's completed front to back. The next one is a professional verification form. This is the medical form, the medical health condition. So this here on the side says that a professional certification must be filled out by professional who meets the criteria. Who actually fills it out isn't as critical as who signs it. What I recommend is whoever fills it out, they know the person the best and they're able to answer the questions. Lacking information is a really big, number one reasons why there's a delay in being approved and certified to have access to the service. So anybody can fill this out. Who signs it matters. And whoever signs it has to be an individual who has the education background, professional credentialing, and provide direct service for the health issues listed on the form. This tends to be the biggest holdup for people applying on the individual application process. Not once it gets to us, but prior to it getting to us. a lot of times this is brought to a support team, social worker, physical therapist, primary care provider, and it sits in that person's office for a long time. So what I recommend, fill this out, bring it to them and say, sign it. You just took 10 minutes versus 2-3 months. It'll also avoid scheduling an appointment with your healthcare provider, paying a copay, or if you've already done your annual physical, doing whatever cost would be to meet with your healthcare provider. Again, outside of that, you're not sitting with your healthcare provider or your service provider, filling out our forms instead of addressing those personal needs that you are meeting them with. It'll save you all those things, and then get it to us. When the application instruction does have a list of the individuals who can sign this, those are just exemplary. That's not the only people that can sign it. Again, it has to just be, again, somebody who has an education background, professional licensing, credentialing, and provide direct services for the health conditions on the application. That's really what it boils down to.
So this is a comment. So I'm a retired nurse, and I was caregiver for family members, and multiple forms of many kinds. I always filled them out. And then I would bring a completed form and a blank form to the physician.
Yep.
And every single time, I said, you can either sign this or start over. Every single time they signed it and said, thank you.
Yep. Oh, exactly. Yeah. Because they have other things to do. They have more things to do than fill out my form. So fill it out. Yep. We are a federally mandated program, so all our funding is, somebody had that question, comes from multiple sources. State, federal, local, municipality, ridership.
What area in the federal government does it come out of?
That's a good question. Transportation. So like state taxes, there's new paid taxes, transportation tax is a portion that goes to public transportation, which we are, so. Oh, yeah, go ahead, on the mic, ask the question so we can.
Okay, I was wondering if you had federal funding for metro mobility.
Yep, and that's and back to my answer the question, yes. And I think I'm gonna read into what your question as well, because we had touched on this earlier. So we are a federally mandated service. Any municipality, city, town that has a regular route city bus are required by federal law to have a metro mobility. It's called Paratransit service. That exists because of the Americans with Disability Act. So for this to go away, the Americans with Disability Act, which has been around since 1990, would have to go away. Nobody's gonna touch that.
Yeah, well, I just want to comment in that, this ADI thing, that includes people with disabilities.
Yep, and so, but again, the disability, and this is off the cuff, the disability community is a very strong, vocal, aggressively advocating community. Because of that, as an example, our service area goes beyond where we are required to provide service because of the disability community. And so it would take an insurmountable amount of effort for metro mobility to not exist or to be
Yeah,
severely impacted.
I had a friend and a former colleague. She passed away about 18 months ago, but she was very active in the disability community. Margot Emdick.
Yes, I know Margot.
And traveling it to other places, I was on our civil rights tour in the South. But anyway, we've done a tremendous amount here in Minnesota in terms of, the curbs, the cutouts on the curbs, and
People
and
come to Minnesota
elevators
because of
and
all
that
the-
kind of thing. So anyway, I don't have to hog the mic here.
Right, and I think that's kind of where I personally emboldened myself too, is because Minnesota, in addition to, again, the fact that the Americans with Disability Act would have to be completely, attacked. Minnesota is very, very, very good for its disability support, its services, its programs. We have lots of people that travel to Minnesota just because of that. So I think, again, off the cuff, personal, this is not a metro mobility stance position. I think even if there was a concern with federal issues impacting, they still got to penetrate the veil of the state level stuff too. So I'm very confident of us being safe. All right, so just make sure we cover this too, because we got the thing. again, make sure that form is signed. If it's not signed, that adds to delay in receiving services and processing us processing the application. This year, submit both forms together. Don't send it off to the doctor and say, could you mail this in? I've already sent my part in. Send them together, because if we get half, we now make it's incomplete, unable to process. We go through a whole nother step and a whole nother sequence of issues and process that we do at Metro Mobility that will delay getting you service to this public transportation. So make sure they are submitted together. Big importance. To even bolded it. The certification process. So how do we do this? What happens when you guys apply? So, back up. How do you get back? I totally did not mean to do that. Is it gonna go? There we go. So the certification process. So once the application comes to us, comes to me or Sarah at the Metro Mobility Customer Service Center, we process all the applications, we make sure they're complete, make sure everything's filled out, make sure they have all the information we need. If that is the case and they meet the eligibility criteria, you are approved, that's it, there's nothing else you need to do. You're riding Metro Mobility. If there isn't enough information, which category of eligibility does a person meet? Which eligibility criteria do they meet? Do we have enough information to support my determination? We often get audited by state and federal levels to make sure that we are compliant with everything that we do. If somebody asks me, says, Dave, why did you approve this person? And I said, well, I assume they'd be eligible because, they'd be like, not a good enough answer. You need to know why this person is eligible. So if the application doesn't have that information, you come and you see me or Sarah, we sit down, we go over the application, fill in the holes, do everything we can to see if we can get you on Metro Mobility service. The last one is that unable to process. This goes back to that, make sure all the forms come together. They're signed, they're filled out, they're complete. If not, we hang on to the incomplete portion, we notify you of what needs to be sent in, we send you that information, and you gotta go through that process again. That can add potentially weeks of getting access to the service. Eligibility status, and this is something we had touched on. So we have the temporary. Those are for the finite things. You have absolutely no issues with accessing public transportation except for right here and now because of a health condition that is finite and will resolve within a set amount of time. The conditional, again, this is somebody who is in that unreasonable effort. They do use the bus, or they can use the bus sometime. What times can they, what times can't they? We make that decision, and that's the level of eligibility we determine for them. The full, again, somebody completely unable to access and utilize regular route city bus. The permanent, be more specific, so with the recertification time frame, that 4 years, that coincides with the duration of renewing your state ID and driver's license. That's why we do it. So the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, says current functional limitations, but doesn't tell you what current is. It just says current. And so state municipalities, local, county, whoever that level that city determines their eligibility at, can make that decision. Some places it's every 2 years, some places every 5 years. We decided to keep it uniform with state recertification, renewal of identification, 4 years. And at 65 years of age, you can apply for, I'm not sure what the criteria is and how this works or what the details of that is, but after 65 years of age in Minnesota, you can have a permanent ID or driver's license. So we do the same thing at 65. So we do have a set age, not just, well, they're older, but instead of making it complicated, well, they only have these conditions, but they're 90, well, then they have these and they're 68. It's a finite age for consistency, so. How does it work? This is the fun part right here. So, to use Metro Mobility, you do need to schedule a ride. And so you do need to call. Our service here is quite large, and we have a large number of passengers, so we are divided into 3 different zones. Where you live is the only thing that determines, or what your home address is, only determines which zone you're in. You are not restricted, confined, and encapsulated in these zones. These are just us for logistic reasons to be able to kind of divide and conquer all the ride requests, ride demands. For calling and scheduling your rides, we do not do same-day rides. You do need to call 1 to 4 days in advance. It's 1 to 4 days, not 1 to 4 business days. We don't do same-day rides. You can't call 2 weeks out. It's 1 to 4 days. And calling 1 day versus 4 days, really no impact. Calling 4 days in advance, you just know 4 days earlier what time your ride's scheduled than you would if you called the day before. Reservations are open every day, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., 365 days a year. They don't close for holidays, government weekend, nothing. Every day, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Again, 365 days a year. We now have added the ability to schedule your rides online. I love this. This is fun. And with the online scheduling, so we don't have an app. We're in the process of developing one, but it never came to fruition. So you do need to go to our website. What I recommend as a workaround for an app, if you have a touchscreen phone or smartphone, go to our website on your phone, because there's kind of a rabbit hole you have to run down. So you got to find our website. Then once you get to the website, you have to click on scheduling trips. Once you've clicked on that, you got to go to book your trip online. Then after you've gotten to that, then you get to this page. It looks somewhat, because like the web version versus the mobile version's slightly altered, but it's fairly similar. Once you get to this page on your phone, add this to your home screen. There's a little drop-down menu depending on if you're Apple or if you're iOS or user. When you add this to your home screen, you now have a little icon on your phone that looks just like an app. You tap on it, it takes you right here. And that's so much easier.
That doesn't let you already would have scheduled, or is that the schedule?
This is the schedule. So this is where you would log in to schedule the rides. Yep. So once you get here, you log in, you start scheduling your rides online. And it works just like calling in. It asks for a pickup address, a pickup date, pickup time, drop-off location, and you schedule that trip, and then it pulls up, is this information correct? Is this where you want to go? When you want to go there, you click accept, and then you return, then you schedule the return trip back again. And then what's nice, once you do go onto this and you do book your rides online, you can see those rides. Instead of like, oh my gosh, is my ride at 8:15 tomorrow, or was it 8:30? Because that 50 minutes is enough time to drink a cup of coffee. So you can go in, you can think, oh, it's scheduled at this time. The other thing, and this is where people like, my bus showed up late. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I'd be retired 10 years ago. The reason for that, where that timing is, so when we schedule our rides, we schedule in the here and now, it's based on known factors. How far that bus is traveling, how fast it's going, how long it's going to take to get there. Day of, weather, red lights, the last 3 people couldn't find their card to pay for the rides. Those things can affect the actual time. You go online, you can see when your bus is going to show up. So you see the scheduled time and the estimated pickup time in real time. So you know, okay, I can go use the washroom before my bus comes. I forgot my phone charger, I can grab it. So you know how much time and when that bus is going to show up. And you'll see it on a map. They'll actually have a little map too to show you where the bus is. So if your bus is driving around circles, you can call and say, hey, I'm looking at your bus. He's 3 blocks south of me. Get a hold of the driver. Tell him to go on up. So this is really handy. This is really nice. And you can cancel your rides. So when you say you got a cold or a flu or plans change, you just go on, click on that ride, open it up, hit delete, and the ride's canceled. You don't have to call reservations and go through that whole process. So I think it's much handier. Still call. Everybody likes talking on the phone, and you can still make them on the phone call too. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question about this, the scheduling, in that if someone has a doctor's appointment, it seems like they can put in what time they have to be someplace, but they don't necessarily know what time they're going to get picked up. Do you decide that, or does the person?
The person does. So this is a great question. I hear this all the time. So here's my suggestion. Here's what I do. So for most doctor's appointments, you have an idea how long you're going to be there. My physical is going to be 45 minutes. I'm probably going to sit in the lobby for 20. So you've done these things enough times, And the clinic will tell you too. You can ask the clinic, hey, how long is this procedure? So you have that. I mean, obviously the wait time, the time after, those are variables, but at least you have an idea. So what I tell people is to be generous with how long you think you're going to be there. Because then, if you're sitting in the doctor's appointment, like, oh, I've got your diagnosis, and they're like, oh, I got to go catch my bus. You don't have to do those kind of things. And you can sit there with confidence knowing that you have a ride home. If you are wildly off in your estimation of how long you think you're going to be there, you can call reservations. Even though we don't do same-day rides, sometimes we have flexibility. You can call reservations, and depending on how busy we are at the time, how many rides we have, we might be able to find you an earlier ride. And so you may not have to sit there for that time, but if you do, bring a magazine, pack a lunch, and just know that you're going to be there longer than you thought you were going to be there.
What do they do if that's not a possibility and they have misestimated? I mean, you call Lyft or something? No.
Oh.
So I was just wondering, what do people do if they have misestimated and their appointment does go much longer and you don't have the flexibility that particular time?
So a couple things. So it depends on how much. So once your bus shows up, they wait 5 minutes. If you just missed your bus, there might be a chance we can get a hold of that driver and have them circle back and come get you. We do not want to leave people stranded. We will do everything we can to get you home. You may have to wait a while. We have our typical high volume times. And it kind of runs like a bell curve. So 3 a.m. and 9 a.m. times, Monday through Friday, are our busiest times. And Monday's not as bad as Tuesday. Tuesday's not as bad, or Monday's better than Tuesday. Tuesday's better than Wednesday. So Wednesday from 3 p.m. or 9 a.m., you may be sitting there a while. Monday or Friday at 3 p.m. and 9 p.m., 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., you may not be sitting there very long. So it just depends on how busy we are, but we will do everything we can to come get you and get you home. So we won't leave you stranded. If that time is too long, then you probably would have to call like Lyft or Uber or something like that. So does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but do you ever have to defer to Lyft or something like that?
We do not. That would be on the individual. So we tried working with Lyft and other things like that to kind of supplement the service, and it didn't work out very well, mainly because of just service provision requirements, federal law, things like that need to be attended to and adhered to, and those services couldn't meet those requirements. So,
Do you have services to the airport?
yes, that's a great. Yes, we do the airport. I got all kinds of things to tie in with that too. So when I get to this slide further, I remind we've already talked about it. So yes, so our service area is huge. I will actually, because of this, jump ahead to this slide, if I can find it. And this is probably one of the biggest and most important reasons why I love doing these things and talking to the community is this question here. Do you guys go to the airport? Yes. Where do we go? Anywhere on this map. Anywhere on this map. If you notice, it's quite large. And what I mean, so that people I encounter this quite often. People often, when they apply for Metro Mobility, they think it is only for what they are applying for. I need to get to my doctor's appointment. I need to get to work. I need to get to school. Yes, it's for those things, but it is not just that. It literally is anything. Friend's house, grocery store, coffee shop, movie theater, place of worship, library, bowling alley, bingo hall, casino and Prior Lake. It doesn't matter. If the only two things that need to be met, if you ask, should I use Metro Mobility, can I use Metro Mobility service, is it on this map, and do you run at those hours? If your trip answers those two questions, it does not matter where you are going, what you are doing. We cannot deny or prioritize rides because of where you're going. We are a city bus. So I always tell people this: if you could take a city bus and you were standing at the bus stop, the driver pulls up and asks, where are you going? And you tell them where they're going, they're not going to close the door and drive away because you can't use the bus for that. Same with us. We are just a city bus, nothing more. The only difference between us and the regular city bus is that application process I talked about. You have to be eligible to use it, and we don't have set routes. Other than that, we're public transportation. Anything. And the other thing that ties with the airport, this is what I like about this. So eligibility is a federal standard. It's not just something the Met Council determined who gets to ride, that Metro Mobility determined who gets to ride. It is a federal standard. So if you're eligible here in the Twin Cities, you're eligible anywhere else that has a city bus. And federal law requires agencies to provide what's called visitor status. And what that means is if you're traveling to Chicago You call to head to Chicago, let them know that you're coming in. They will allow you to use their version of Metro Mobility service without going through the same application process. There is a verification process, and so we do, the more advanced notice, the better. So it all just depends on the agency. Do we fax over a cover letter? Do we just call and verbally verify? Do we send an email, let them know that they are currently eligible? And that's really not as essential with that visitor status. The ADA only requires you to disclose you have a disability. The agency doesn't require any verification, doesn't require any proof, any documentation. The ADA says if you disclose you have a disability and you want visitor status at that city, they're supposed to allow you to use it. And so, yeah, take it to the airport, fly down to Miami, get off the airplane at Miami Airport and use their form of Metro Mobility to get to your hotel. That's a great question. I like that.
It's not called Metro Mobility, I don't think, in every municipality.
No. The only other place I know it's called Metro Mobility is Colorado Springs. And it's Mountain Metro Mobility. We get a lot of applications from them too.
Yeah, because my brother in Salt Lake City, my brother was disabled, and I don't remember what the name of it was anymore, but it was
Something
very
else, yeah.
different.
Yep.
So how would you know, like, if you want to, because you have to ask in advance, right? Like,
Right.
you're going to go to another city.
Just so they can get you in the system, so they can have you as a rider. So they can get you into the system, so they have you as a rider, and they can
But
schedule it.
how would you know where to look, because it's called something else?
It is. And that's the easiest way, because it is a public transportation service. So I'd recommend starting off looking up that city's public transportation itself, the big bus, the regular city bus, and just kind of start noodling around. And like the keyword that you could use is paratransit service.
Paratransit,
Yep.
yeah,
And that's the overall encompassing
Yeah.
term for this type of service. But yeah, they're not all called Metro Mobility. They can call it whatever they want.
I have another question because I'm interested in using this. Where exactly do you drop off and pick up people at the airport?
We have, I'm going to give you a general answer. We have a dedicated drop-off and pick-up location. It's by the baggage claim, I believe. I'm not sure exactly where at the airport it is, but we have a designated, and it's aside from like where the cabs and stuff, I believe, drop off, but we do have a designated spot.
Is it close? Is it an accessible place?
Oh, it has to be. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it has to be an accessible location. That's critical. We can't. So the service itself is door-through-door service or curb-to-curb service. So we are required to park. The drivers have to have the vehicle with an eyesight of the entrance, and so they're not going to park in the back of the ramp and wish you the best of luck. It is right up front at the door. So.
Well, we're pretty much coming to the end here. Dave, thank you. One final question. I'm fascinated because I see the vans everywhere. I'm going to talk head count. How many people do you serve in a week or month or whatever, basically, day?
So those are big numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people we have actually certified as riders. I'd have to do some digging for that. But typically we do about 6,000 to 8,000 rides per day.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was as I was
That's
sharing.
my
Yeah,
question.
as I was sharing with Bryce last year. And a couple of people already heard this. It's old news for some of you guys. We were in one of the top 4 cities in the United States for number of rides on paratransit service. Again, I don't know which one we were, but we were in the top 4, and we provided the most trips per capita of any city in the United States that has paratransit service. So yes, we are busy.
Wow.
We are busy. What we're doing. You guys ask me all these technical questions. 320, 350, I believe. It's in the upper 300s. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Let's give Dave a hand.
Thanks, you guys. And do you want me to stick around for questions?
Yeah, anybody who has questions, hang out a little.
Time. I earmarked time to be here longer. So if you guys have more questions, I can stick around and answer questions as well. So.
And next week, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to learn a lot. The focus is on assistance dogs. And we're going to learn how puppies that enter the Can-Do Canines training program, how they become assistance dogs, and what types of service that they provide for people with disabilities. I hope maybe she will bring a dog. Who knows? Because she does a lot of outreach, so that would be great. Anyway, thanks a lot, Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah.